Just welcome to everybody. Welcome, John, and we can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. So as everyone here has heard many, many times, the most important factor of any action that determines whether that activity, that action will be truly beneficial or not to ourselves is the motivation with which we engage in that action. This is quite contrary to the way we often believe that the value of an activity, the value of an action lies within the action itself. So, for example, if we take the example of generosity, for example, then the generosity of giving $1 million to some charity is much greater than the charity of giving $10 to that charity, because that first action is much larger, much bigger than the second one. And of course, that's true to a certain extent. But in terms of the effect that the action we engage in has on ourselves, whether we derive maximum benefit or not, doesn't depend primarily on the action, but on the motivation with which we do it. So there are many stories, for example, in the history of great teachers from the past, including the Buddha himself, in which a person who gave a great philanthropy, equivalent to millions of dollars, it was declared that the benefit of that particular person was much less than the benefit derived from a beggar who could not give anything, but who rejoiced in the thought that the rich person's generosity would benefit many people. The reason why the beggar's benefit was greater than the rich person's was because in this case, the rich person, though he gave a tremendous amount of money, which would eventually lead to benefit for others, his own personal motivation was self-aggrandizement. In other words, he thought, oh, now I'm going to get the reputation of being a very generous person. People will look up to me, my status will increase. So the motivation actually, even though the money went to help other people, the motivation for that person was nearly 100% to benefit only himself, to increase his reputation. So in that case, the beggar who looked at that action from the outside, because he didn't have any money to give anyone, but he saw the rich man making that offering of generosity, and he thought, oh, how wonderful that this person is able to give so much a material benefit to others. And he rejoiced in that. So his motivation was very pure. He only thought of how many people would benefit, whereas the rich person was only thinking of how much he himself would benefit. And so Buddha, in relating this story, pointed out that it is the motivation with which we do an action which primarily determines whether we ourselves, as the performer of that action, will reap the highest benefit from it. And so for that reason, whenever we engage in an action, particularly in an action which has to do quite directly with the Dharma, the teachings of the path and the realizations that are to be developed on that path, especially when it's a Dharma-related activity, the motivation with which we do that action is primary. And so traditionally, as we're going to do today in a few moments, traditionally we begin the action by reminding ourselves of the source of our spiritual benefit, our inspiration, and whether we are a spiritual being or not, whether we're a Buddhist or not, when we perform a truly virtuous, beneficial action, we're being inspired by someone or something outside of ourselves is inspiring us to do that action. So the first thing to do is to bring to mind that source of inspiration. In strictly Buddhist terms, the primary source of inspiration are what is known, and this is, everyone here is already familiar with this, is known as the three jewels of refuge. The Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the teachings, or the actual refuge, and the Sangha as the community who supports our practice. So typically at the beginning of any Dharma activity, and also for those who are practitioners, the beginning of any significant activity, we call to mind the source of refuge, the inspiration. If we are not Buddhist, if we're not following a particularly Buddhist path, then we can bring to mind whatever it is that inspires us to do generous, beneficial activities, according to whatever own philosophical or spiritual background may be. And then, after that, then we generate the bodhicitta motivation, the motivation to achieve enlightenment or awakening for the benefit of others. So the 4-line prayer that we are going to recite, that everyone here is already familiar with, begins with 2 lines of refuge, which we'll have in a moment, and then 2 lines of generating this bodhicitta, or the motivation of a bodhisattva, someone who is motivated to win full awakening himself or herself in order to be of maximum benefit to others. So with this kind of supreme refuge and bodhicitta, it ensures whatever action takes place afterwards will be of maximum benefit, will have will reap the highest benefit for ourselves, and by extension for others as well. I mentioned this in the beginning, not so much as a reminder for those of you who are gathered here, but as a reminder for myself, because here today, in this action that there's 5 of us here at the moment, so the collective action that the 5 of us are undergoing, 4 of us are predominantly silent. That's the 4 of you, right? And my action is to speak a lot for this half hour. Okay, so if no matter how beneficial the words that I'm saying may prove to be to others, to the other 4 of us, right? The question is, what is my motivation for engaging in this action of speaking, of teaching, of sharing the Dharma? And I know from looking into myself, I know only too well that my motivation could simply be have people think nicely of me. People think, oh, John is a good speaker, or that was a good point, or he sounds so intelligent, and he must be intelligent because there's thousands of books behind him on the screen, you know. So it could be simply self-aggrandizement. And that motivation, that very worldly, narrow, I, me, mine motivation can arise so easily, even during an activity which is meant to be truly beneficial for oneself and others. that sneaky selfishness can come in a moment. It can overshadow and make us forget about what the higher motivation for our actions might be. So when I begin this by reciting with all of us the verses of refuge and bodhicitta, it's not so much trying to persuade anyone else that we should have this kind of orientation into our time together, but to make sure that myself, at least momentarily, I can suppress this selfishness, the self-aggrandizement attitude, which arises so easily based on the thought, what are people going to think of me, and exchange it for what is beneficial for others. So the same thing, those of us who are here together, who may notice that their motivation for engaging in this group activity today is less than sterling, is maybe is colored by some similarly selfish attitude as the one I described for myself, then this is a chance, at least momentarily, to try to rectify that by cultivating refuge and bodhicitta. Okay, so with that as a background, we can we'll now have the prayer for refuge and bodhicitta, and we can do that together. Today I'm going to do it a little bit differently than when I've done it in the past. Generally, these prayers that I do here, I do in English, and sometimes in a group activity can do it in Tibetan as well. This time I'm going to go through it 3 times, and the first time I am going to do it in Tibetan, only because the recitation of Tibetan reminds me of the influence of my own teachers who taught it to me in Tibetan, and because there's quite a lovely tune and rhythm to it. But then the second time, to remind ourselves of the actual meaning, then we'll do it once in English. And then the final time, I'm only going to do the last 2 lines, the ones which focus upon the motivation itself of doing the action for the benefit of others. Okay. So first, in Tibetan. Sangye Judan Soke Chonam La Changjum Badu Dagni Kyapsunji Dagi Jin Soingi Pe Sonangi Rola Benje Sangye Drupansho. We go for refuge until our enlightenment to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits we create through practicing the Dharma, may we become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. May we become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And it's possible for people who are not familiar with this approach to be a little bit concerned about that phrase, may we become a Buddha, or may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings, because the image we have in our mind of being a Buddha is could be like a statue. It could be a picture of an ancient Indian sage with elongated earlobes. Or we might think, well, I'm not interested in becoming like that. So what does it mean if we say or think, may I become a Buddha? May I become a Buddha? Okay? So that is, in a sense, a code term. Becoming a Buddha means, and this is applicable for whatever spiritual tradition or even non-spiritual tradition you come from, that actually signifies is, may we fulfill our highest potential. Whatever we conceive of our highest potential as a human being for being, that's what it means when we say, may we become a Buddha, may I become a Buddha, may I achieve enlightenment. And we all have extraordinary potential, don't we? You know? At different times in our life, we're capable of great acts of self-sacrifice, of giving ourselves for others, of going that extra mile so that someone else will be happy or safe or satisfied, in which there are times, even though if you're like me, the majority of your waking hours are filled with thoughts of I, me, mine, there are times when our heart is open towards others, where we engage in truly selfless activities. And that type of attitude, that type of orientation, in Buddhist terms, is the orientation of someone striving to be a bodhisattva, someone striving to become fully enlightened, to achieve this state of bodhi, to become a Buddha, in order to be of maximum benefit to others, to give full rein to this spirit of enlightenment, in which our own selfish concerns are put into, at least momentarily, are put into a secondary position, and we think of the welfare of others primarily. And so, even though those prayers, whether it's in Tibetan or in English, whether the full prayers or the abbreviated version comes from the Buddhist tradition, my own point of view is, if we understand the meaning behind refuge in bodhicitta, then whether we are Buddhist or not, whether, as the Dalai Lama often says, whether we're a believer or not, there's great meaning in terms of our own life. Refuge is orienting ourselves to the highest form of inspiration that we can, that impinges on our life, and that gives value and direction to our life, and then cultivating the bodhicitta motivation. May we attain the state of a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings, to replace any selfishness that has arisen or that may be arising, and really focus our intention on the welfare of others. Okay. Because we only have very limited time, and I've already used a fair amount of it with this introduction and being a bit late to be together, I didn't think to open it to question, though I would give my email address so that if people had questions that they wanted to pose for next time or at any time, I would do that. And so I will post my email address, at least at the conclusion of this. But since we're a more intimate group this morning, I thought if there is a question or concern that you'd like to ask now, I would certainly be open to considering that. Is there something that comes up in your mind based on what's been said already this morning that you'd like to ask about or maybe provide clarification for? Okay, so apparently not yet, so that's fine. Then what I would like to do is maybe move into what was going to follow from the main presentation and to go into it right away rather than waiting until the main presentation is over. And that is, as I'm sure many of you know, because of your previous background, that our guru, Khadro Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it has been observed that there are, at this time, certain obstacles, not named as far as I know, certain obstacles to his health and long life, and that the observation was made that by thinking about and reciting certain prayers, particularly to the goddess Tara, by groups of his disciples, that this can have a very beneficial effect in avoiding these obstacles or turning them back, thereby helping ensure that Lama Zopa Rinpoche stays with us in good health for a long time. So I think we have the prayer that I want to point to. Yes, here it is. Oh, and very, very nice. Also, there is this prayer was put together also joined with this image of Tara. That wasn't my idea, but that's beautiful. This is quite a special image. It was designed by our beloved Lama Yeshe as the figure of Tara, and particularly one that he designed in order to be made, and is residing, or has been residing for many years, in the Gompa, the main meditation room at our sister center, Vajrapani, in Boulder Creek, California.
Jennifer added that for us.
Could you say that again?
Jennifer added the image for us.
Oh, yes, very nice. Thank you, Jennifer, wherever you may be. No, that's wonderful. So, a word, a brief word. Actually, as you'll learn if you don't know already, when I use the word, I'm about to make a brief remark. That's usually not accurate. Usually my brief remarks are overly verbose. But as brief as I can make it, there is a special story about how the prayer that we're going to do, this 5-line prayer that you see next to Tara, how that came into being. There are different versions of the story of how this prayer came to being, but I'm going to use the one that I was taught, and that is that Atisha, the one who's most responsible after Guru Rinpoche for bringing Buddhism into Tibet 1,000 years ago, he had a special relationship with Tara. And when he came to Tibet, he taught Tara extensively. And his main Tibetan disciple, Drom Demba, who later was recognized as an incarnation of Chenrezig, the male Buddha of compassion, and the progenitor of the line of the Dalai Lamas. Drom Demba himself had a disciple, and this disciple was ill. He was sick with some problem, some affliction, and it became clear to Drom Demba that the only way he was going to overcome this illness is if people would recite the praises to the 21 Taras 10,000 times. But that praise, as some of you know, the praise to the 21 Taras is quite extensive and takes quite a long time even to recite once, and to recite it 10,000 times would be impossible in one day. So Drom Demba told his teacher, Atisha, what the situation was, that this disciple needed help, but there was no time to recite that prayer for the 21 Taras so many times. So Atisha did what he often did, and that was, in his meditation, he consulted directly with Tara, with whom he had this intimate relationship. And so Tara herself came up with a 5-line version, which contains within it the essence of everything that's within the longer prayer, the praises to the 21 Taras. And as we look, just even look superficially, within the prayer, 5 words have been highlighted in yellow. And those of you who are familiar with Tara will recognize these 5 words in Sanskrit are the essence, the elements of Tara's mantra. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Turi Soha. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Turi Soha. So when we recite these 5 lines, we are at the same time reciting Tara's mantra, because it is included within those 5 lines. Then also in the prayer, there are certain phrases in English that have been highlighted or been are given in bold font. So if you look and see, for example, in the second line, the phrase "who frees" has been highlighted. In the next line, "who calms all fears" has been highlighted. And in the 4th line, "who grants all success" has been highlighted. And the reason for that is that Tare, the first full word in, I should say, by the way, that Tare, Tu Tare, and Turi are all forms of Tara's own name. We generally call her Tara, but in the prayers to her, when we recite the mantra, Tara's own name is given in 3 different forms, each one focusing on one of the main salient qualities of why we call on Tara for help. So when we recite Tare, we're thinking of Tara as the one who frees us, who is, in that sense, a savior, a deliverer us from problems. And in Tibetan, we call Tara Droma, who indicates the liberator, one who's liberating us. And so this has everything to do for liberation from difficulties we're experiencing, all the way up to the attainment of full awakening, full enlightenment, true liberation, nirvana. Then Tu Tare those syllables, that version of her name, focuses on Tara's ability to calm our fear. Because many times, whether or not we're experiencing a particular difficulty at any one moment, we're hamstrung by fears we have, fears of incapability and so forth, or impending danger. And then finally, Ture focuses on her ability to grant us success. So when we engage in activities, we often call on Tara so that that activity will be successful. For example, in Tibet, if there was a group activity meant to benefit the community, such as building a monastery or founding a hospital or doing any activity like that, Tara is the one that they call on so that that activity proves to be successful. So as we recite this prayer, which I'm going to do once in English, then several times in Tibetan, even if we don't know all the words, the meaning of all of the words in the Tibetan prayer, we can keep in mind that what we're doing is we're invoking the qualities of Tara, her qualities to free us from fear, to free us from any obstacles, to calm our fears, and to grant us success. And the reason I'm particularly interested in having us recite this prayer is that it's been observed that for this 2-week period of time that's already started a few days ago, it's been observed that this would be an excellent, important time for people, especially those devoted to Khadro-la Rinpoche, to recite this prayer. That is the one of the main activities we can do to generate the positive energy, which can have as its effect overcoming any obstacles to the long life and good health of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So with that motivation in our mind, read this prayer once in English, and then we can recite it, or if it's easier for us, simply recite the mantra of Tara a number of times over the next 10 minutes. Om, to the transcendent subduer, Aryatara, I prostrate. Homage to the glorious one who frees with Tare, who calms all fears with Tutare, who grants all success with Ture. To the one with Soha, I bow down. Om Tare Tutare Turi Soha. Now the recitation of the prayer in Tibetan, in whichever form you find most conducive for your own practice, dedicating all of this to the manifestation of excellent health and long life to our precious Guru. Om Jondende Ma Pagma Domala Chanselo Chaksel Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tamche Telma Soha Yige Chelara Tu Om Jondende Ma Pagma Doma Chanselo Chaksel Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tamche Telma Soha Yige Elara Tu Om Chomdende Ma Pagma Doma La Chanselo Chaksel Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tamche Telma Soha Yige Chelara Tu Om Chomdende Ma Pagma Doma La Chakselo Chaksel Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tamche Telma Soha Yige Chelara Tu Om Chondende Ma Pagma Doma La Chagzelo Chaksel Doma Tare Pelmo Tutadai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tam Shetelma Sohai Giche Lara Tu. And now each of us individually, together, silently or out loud, can recite these prayers, and I will be doing it 21 times. Om Shamdinde Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tam Shetelma Sohai Giche Lara Om Shamdinde Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tare Pelmo Tutarai Jigun Selma Ture Dunam Tam Shetelma Sohai Giche Lara Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagsel Chaksel Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Chigun Selm Turi Dunam Tam Chetelma Sohai Giche Rara Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagsel Chaksel Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Chigun Selm Turi Dunam Tam Chetelma Sohai Giche Rara Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagsel Jaksel Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Chigun Selm Turi Dunam Tamchi Telma Sohai Giche Lara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Jagzel Jaksel Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Chigun Selm Turi Dunam Tamchi Telma Sohai Giche Lara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Jagzel Jaksel Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Chigun Selma Turi Dunam Tamchi Telma Sohai Giche Lara Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Tutarai Jiganzel Ma Turi Taram Tachitema Sopai Gichevera Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Tutarai Jiganzel Ma Turi Taram Tachitema Sopai Gichevera Om Shamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Tutarai Jiganzel Ma Turi Taram Tachitema Sopai Gichevera Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Tu Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara Om Jamdene Mapama Doma La Chagzelo Chakso Doma Tari Pelmo Tutarai Jiganzelma Turi Danam Tachitema Sohai Gichelara So by the virtuous merit of reciting these prayers, their precious Guru and all, indeed all our spiritual masters, everyone teaching true paths leading to higher rebirth, liberation, and full enlightenment, may be endowed with long life, good health, and an expansive scope for sharing their spiritual understanding. And of course, on our own, over this 2-year period of time, it would be very helpful if we can recite this prayer with this proper motivation and direct them towards specifically the long lives of our teachers, and among them, specifically Khadro Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So, the virtuous merit of these actions. Maybe move that much closer to fulfilling our highest potential and be able to follow the bodhisattva path fully in order to bring maximum benefit not only to our own lives, but to the lives of all beings that we encounter. Okay.